All right, people, a momentous week, a momentous occasion. The week before Christmas, traditionally the epicenter of some of the biggest releases of the past 10 years. Previously, this slot was occupied by the Disney Star Wars movies. And then in that weird 2018 spot when they put Solo on Memorial Day, they instead released Aquaman on this slot, allowing Aquaman to somehow gross over $1 billion. And then we had the weird COVID hell before Spider-Man No Way Home took this spot. And now we have the third Avatar movie. But first, we are hitting our Talkin' Lost recap of the week. And Luke, I think it's safe to say we are in the end game now in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, this feels like very much if it were a movie, it would be the episode, or if it were, say, a Mission Impossible movie, it's the one where they discuss how the climax is going to go, what the plan is going to be, where they set all the pieces into play, and then the climax happens. So this is that in an episode form. So again, it's preparing us for some tragic occurrences. It couldn't be more obvious what they're preparing us for. I think it'll be worth it. They'll set it up well, and it'll be tragic and heroic. But and this episode is that in all the best ways.
They've been setting us up all season for it, and now this is the episode. They basically tell us this is the Charlie's gonna die episode. But like in true Lost fashion, I like that we are fully like at this point in the show. I feel like what Lost has done very well with its finales and its lead up to its finales, I should say, is they really perfected this last season, with the 3 minutes episode with queuing us up for Michael's betrayal ultimately. And that one, you also had the True for the Road that kind of led into it. This one, we've had a lot of episodes of setup. They found Naomi. They know about the freighter that's offshore. They know the others are coming for them. They finally find out about Juliet's triple agent status, where Juliet reveals that she has been sent, obviously, to infiltrate them in order to help the others discover which of the women are pregnant ultimately. But really, like I said, this episode is all focused around Charlie. This episode is called Greatest Hits, and as we come to discover in this episode, it is basically this episode very, very much reminded me of, remember the Star Wars Rebels episode that was basically setting us up that, like,
I have not seen Rebels.
Okay, so there's an episode in the last season where they're basically setting us up for anybody who is familiar with the character of Kanan Jarrus. He meets a very tragic end in the show, but the way that his final episode plays out is that the whole episode is setting you up for, like, he's gonna die. So the whole episode, he's kind of like saying his goodbyes with everybody. He's making his peace with everybody with his time. Charlie has been, I'll say, a conflicting character to say the least. Previously, I believe that he was a fan favorite, at least coming out of season one, the drug-addled rock star. We were talking a lot in season one about how, one of the more interesting things they did is like, oh, what if you had a drug addict who didn't have access to his supply on the island? And then, like so many other things in Lost, again, whether it was pre-planned or not, but then they coincidentally stumble upon a plane full of drugs, which of course sends him down a little bit of a dark path in season two that turns him into a little bit of a heel before he's ultimately made his comeback, his redemption. While this season, he's been, I don't want to say a plot device. I think that's a little bit unfair, but he has essentially been, the epicenter of Desmond's kind of, part of Desmond's, part of Desmond's flash forwards, visions of the future, if you will, where Desmond has been seeing him die all season. The show has not been subtle about that. And now, again, really, it's the beginning of the end. I talked about this in the last couple of weeks about how coming out of season three was a make or break season in terms of determining whether the show was going to have a future. Fans were really starting to get unsatisfied after those first 6 episodes. The writers felt that they were in a lock, and man, did they pull something out, because how they were able to pull out and set up for this finale, I am still studying to this day. It's the equivalent, I would say. It's ironic that we're covering a massive, massive action blockbuster. I would argue the action blockbuster of the year right after this, when we have ultimately kind of the first of 3 parts of what is ultimately our goodbye to Charlie. Like I said, this episode is called Greatest Hits. I love also how they employed the flashback sequences. I will also say, too, the final flashback sequence that we see, the true flashback sequence, I should say, that we see of the entire show, really, where we see Charlie throughout the episode is writing down on this piece of paper a list of what he calls his greatest hits, which are the 5 greatest moments of his life, which, as we see, are the moment when they got stuck in a rainstorm on the way to a gig, and the first time that they heard their epic song, You Are Everybody, playing on the radio, the time his dad taught him to swim, the time that, that his brother gave him their family heirloom ring, the time that he unintentionally saved Nadia, Saeed's great love, from getting robbed, and finally the time that he met Claire when they all crash landed on the island. So it's very, very emotionally poignant. I really, really was starting to feel the tears swell here. Like, this episode is really, really preparing us for a very emotional, heartfelt goodbye.
Yeah, even 3 seasons in, about what 60 something episodes in, where they still managed to innovate with the flashbacks, even in a little way like this. Just a trip down, literally a trip down memory lane. In case of Charlie, his best memories, just like, yeah, reminding us, like, yeah, he's been a constant presence on this island. He's been essentially one of the comic relief characters, and yeah, like maybe this season he's more of a plot man. I guess that's something we can talk about when we talk about Avatar as well. But yeah, like you said, if he was a fan favorite, I completely understand that. He just feels like one of the cast. Like he couldn't really think of the show without him. At least that's how I feel.
And it really shows too how this episode opens with, like I said, we haven't actually talked about any of the plot, any of the actual setup, the circumstances that are ultimately going to be leading to his death ultimately. But the fact that you really only see like the main core group of survivors, minus Locke, obviously, because he's like in a ditch somewhere with a bullet in his chest. But thanks, Ben. But yeah, it's Jack. You see the main group: Jack, Juliet, Kate, Sawyer, Sun, Jin, Saeed, Hurley, Claire, and Charlie are all making their way up to rendezvous with Russo so that they can, reveal what their grand plan is. And it really feels like Charlie was one of the initial core 14. Obviously, we lost Boone and Shannon along the way, but let's face it, nobody's really missing them at this point. So the fact that they're laying it in really this heavy is showing us that, like, yeah, like this is like one of our core guys. And it showed, like, the thing that Lost, I would say, established even before Game of Thrones did, is that nobody is safe. Anybody can go. Anybody could die at any point. And I remember even when Lindelof was talking to Dominic Monaghan, he even offered him to be like, okay, we can find a way to keep him alive. We can find a way to keep him in the show. And Monaghan even was like, no, like, if this is what's needed for the story, then this is what's got to happen. I got to go. And I really got to give credit to actors for that, because so much of the time actors are like, for lack of a better word, bitching and complaining and being like, no, you can find a way to keep me around. I famously remember the actor who plays Mikey Palmisi in the first season of The Sopranos pitched like 18 different ways in which he could stick around in the show. David Chase.
Yeah, because this is their employment.
Yeah, it's their employment. Yeah.
Like, sorry, you're sort of fired.
Yeah, pretty much. It's always funny, like, too, how actors always tell different stories about like their meetings with showrunners and the time in which they can figure out, like, oh shit, I'm dying, I'm getting written off the show. But real good. So let's. I don't want to talk any more about Charlie's death, because I don't want to, at the risk of spoiling next week, which is our big grand Lost season 3 finale, which is where a bulk of the action takes place. I do want to get into like some of the actual action stuff that happens here. Pretty much the bulk of this episode is Carl arrives on the beach and basically tells them that, okay, so you thought that the others were planning to attack. Well, actually, let me preface with this first. Jack and Juliet revealed to the group that, like, okay, Juliet told me everything about Ben's plan. She's actually been like a triple agent this whole time. We thought that she was infiltrating us for Ben. Turns out she actually wants to take him down and stop him. And this is all in conjunction with the fact that they know about Naomi's freighter. Saeed has the satellite phone. They're like, look, we have to contact this freighter if we want to get rescued. Jack is like, we have to deal with the others first. And so there's a little bit of conflict back and forth with Jack and Saeed as far as what the best course of action is, whether to contact the freighter or whether to deal with the others first. Jack ultimately decides, like, look, the last 90 days you've been telling me that I should be the leader. So now I'm making an executive decision. We're dealing with the others first. Like, because for the first time in our entire time of the island, we can't hide, but we know exactly where they're going to attack. We know when they're going to attack, and we finally have a chance to deal with them once and for all. Yeah. So,
and then there's the curveball of, oh, they're actually coming today.
They're actually coming today, which is when Carl arrives. Carl arrives, Alex's boyfriend, after, Ben arrives back in camp. I love the interaction too when Ben comes back in camp, extra wide-eyed, bug-eyed. Richard is trying to be like, what happened with Jacob? And Ben is just like, oh, Locke had an accident, like that, the little, like, he's feeling a little extra twitchy there. I feel like his leadership with the others has never been more unstable. And he gathers the one other, be like, take 10 of your best guys. If anybody is stupid enough to get in your way, you know what to do. That whole thing. Alex runs off, warns Carl, tells him, he's like, look, Kate and Sawyer saved your life. You owe them this. You got to warn them. Carl gets to the beach, warns them just in time that, like, oh, they're coming tonight, ultimately. And
love how Saeed just tackles him, like,
oh, it's great.
Like,
it's
not,
great.
Not a second
and the
thought,
fact
like,
that Sawyer is the one that ends up sticking up for him, but it's like, why, ultimately. It's like, it's really all of the threads that have really been built up throughout the whole season are really starting to pay off and come to fruition. But so ultimately, of course, this forces them to change their plan last minute. So the whole ultimate thing also, as far as part of the whole freighter subplot, is that they're like, they contact Russo for help, and now we know why Russo was going to the Black Rock in order to get the dynamite, because they're like, look, we're gonna set this off. When the others come for us, we're gonna, the tents that are marked that they're gonna attack, we're gonna blow them up with dynamite.
This gets Rose and Bernard involved for the
Yes,
first time in like a full
finally.
season.
I don't think we've seen them like all
I don't
season.
think we have.
Really.
They had their flashback towards the end of 2, and
Yeah.
now Bernard happens to be great at shooting,
Yeah.
so he gets involved.
Yeah, he gets a little bit of time to show off there, which is a lot of fun.
When do they say about the Looking Glass station? Is that
So
like
that's part of it. So originally, it's part of the plan to contact it, where Saeed is telling Russo, like, look, if we turn off your distress signal, we may be able to get it out. And that's what Juliet chips in and is like, if that won't work, because there's a Dharma station that's right off the coast of the island that's underwater that blocks all signals coming in and out of the island. That's the reason why nobody's been able to get a signal on or off or find the island. So if we want to use the satellite phone and make contact with the freighter, somebody's got to go out there and somebody's got to disable the freighter. This is when, obviously, again, so Desmond had another flash at the beginning of the episode.
It's a different kind of flashback.
A different kind of flash.
He sees a good thing for once.
He sees Claire and Aaron getting on a helicopter and getting off the island, but he says ultimately that, like, Charlie, if you need to do this, if you want this to happen, like, you need to do this. So it's like you said, it's a different kind. It's not just like Desmond trying to save Charlie. It's Desmond ultimately. It's a reckoning, and Charlie realizes, oh, this is kind of my destiny. I have to do this if I want Claire and Aaron, these two people who I've grown very fond of and grown very connected to make it off the island and have a chance. That I need to do this. I essentially need to sacrifice myself. So Charlie goes up. He volunteers to Jack. Is like, look, I was a junior swimmer. I can hold my breath for a long time. Jack says no at first. Then Carl arrives with the message and is like, and they're like, okay, now everything has to happen all at once. They don't have time to rig up the dynamite. So instead, what they're going to do is they're going to leave some people behind on the beach, and they are going to shoot at the dynamite from a distance in order to blow up the tent for the others, while Jack is going to lead all of the survivors from the beach all the way up to Russo's signal and disable it.
It's very Moses, like, lead my people out to the promised land. And again, it's that classic of, like, if they were too prepared, that's not interesting. That's pretty boring storytelling. So again, you have to throw they actually are here, like, in a few hours. So I can't wait to see what things go wrong there. And of course, that at the very end of the episode, something goes very wrong, and that's going to have to be resolved. But we have to get there first.
It's very much an Avenger scenario where it's like, okay, we've got all the guys back in one spot. We're getting ready to go off. We're getting ready to go off to our final destiny to face the bad guy. As they're marching up, it's very much like a kind of a whole, that one shot sequence where they're all walking towards the time machine in slow motion where you're like fist pumping, like, yeah, they're going to win. They're finally going to get their own. It's kind of one of those there, again, conjoined with, Charlie and Desmond. Desmond volunteers to go with Charlie doing this very, very somber final swim out to the Looking Glass station. Saeed obviously was able to theorize. It's like, okay, so that wire that I found on the beach all the way back in season 1, that's got to lead out to the Looking Glass station. It's the only kind of, it's the only thing that makes sense.
They inadvertently set that up all the way back in season 1. They're like,
look at that.
We're going to put a wire here. We'll figure out
that we have no idea what it's going to lead to. And now here we are 2 seasons later, and it all adds up. What's it called? You have this very, very somber swim out. Charlie has the last of his 2 greatest hits moments. They arrive at the spot. They see the Looking Glass station down there. They have a weight belt that Charlie's going to use to bring him down there. What's it called? Desmond, of course, tries to volunteer. Is like, look, I think I could do this. I think it was my destiny to save you this whole time. And Charlie's like, yeah, mate, sorry, nice try. We already established that, this whole every time you've tried to save me, time is always going to course correct. So we're not doing that this time. So Charlie fakes out Desmond, knocks him out with the paddle, swims down, goes underneath the moon pool, ultimately, makes it in just in time, and then, of course, gets cornered by the others. Boom, cut to credits. So, like I said, it's a fast episode. It's a setup episode, but it's very, very, very somber episode, and it's going to be, I know I've been hyping this season finale through the Looking Glass up for just about a year now, because it's been just about a year and a couple months, roughly, that we've been covering this show since we started it all the way back in September of last year, and man, I'm still not ready. That's all that I'm gonna say to that as far as Lost goes before we switch over to Pluribus. You got any final thoughts before we switch over to Pluribus real quick?
No, I just can't imagine what kind of cliffhanger this finale is going to leave us on, because it's Lost. This is the cliffhanger show.
Yeah, you Lost by this point, but yeah, you're right, because like I said, this is the point. Like I said, this was the make or break. Like, they didn't know if they were going to have future seasons. Thankfully, and I'll cover this more when we get to it next week. Through the Looking Glass truly is the make or break Lost episode, more than any other episode this season. More than Man from Tallahassee, more than this episode, more than The Brig and The Man Behind the Curtain. Like, we had a great great stretch so far for this final stretch of the show. But man, Lindelof and Hughes had their backs up against the wall. They knew that like if they did not pull off this finale, that they weren't coming back for another season. And thankfully they did. But we'll save that all for next week. Real quick,
because it's such a huge thing. They have to do so much. They have to end off this season, pull together all those threads. They have to maybe like have a satisfying enough end, because if they don't know if it's going to continue, and they have to plant seeds for next season.
It's a lot. They have
to start thinking how to lead this into an end of the show. So
yes, they had a lot that they had to pull off. So all that I will say on that is tune in next week in order to see if they pull it off or not. For all diehard Lost fans, you know that they do. But real quick, let's switch over to Pluribus. Not a terribly eventful episode, sort of more of a quiet penultimate episode. Ultimately, this was, I would say, the opposite of last week, where Carol, after spending an entire episode basically doing fuck all around Albuquerque and basically becoming depressed and sad and realizing that she missed having any sort of companionship. Man, I would say that there was never a better case as far as Carol coming this close to almost surrendering to the hive mind. Like, she came very, very, very close is all that I'm going to say. You know, Zosha's back in town. They're hanging out. They're having a good time. They're getting massages. They get to this good old poontang in this episode. Zosha is like maybe starting to show a little bit of agency there when it's revealed that, oh, maybe the whole reason why the hive mind is here is because they love Carol's book. I swear, I've never seen any of these hive mind people more passionate than when Zosha and Carol are talking about the plot for the next Waikaro novel. So I thought that was pretty great in and of itself. So real, just quick breakdown. What did you think of this episode?
Yeah, it's Pluribus is a weird show because we cover Lost every week and it's like so intense, like building towards something. Or other shows like Welcome to Derry, that's always building to something. We'll have my Welcome to Derry final rant this week as well.
Oh man,
it's not a rant because actually
save that for the end of Avatar, but I can't wait to hear your thought. They
actually had a good finale, but
no
anyway.
way, they actually pulled it off.
Yeah, they did somehow. But this Pluribus is such a weird show because like not that much happens, but like it's just so enjoyable still, just from like a character perspective, because it's so focused on one character. It's not like a whole ensemble.
Yeah.
So it's a nice change of pace, but I don't know what it's building to. It's building to Manuso's and Carol meeting, but
it's one of those things where I feel like in this episode, I feel like more than anything else, like the possibilities are truly unlimited, you know, because you literally just see that, like, just off a whim, Zosha's like, oh, we can turn out the power in the whole city so that you can see, you know, the stars ultimately. And so, like, there's a point where they're trying to theorize, like, oh, like the origins of like who sent the message that was then encoded into the virus originally. You have all of these different things that are going on. Carol is still secretly, you know, working. The fact that she basically says is like, look, I know what you're doing. You're trying to kind of disarm me. You know, you rebuilt my favorite restaurant as a kid from scratch. You brought this poor waitress who had retired and had a life back, you know, just to cater to me ultimately. So like, I feel like even more so now you're starting to see the cracks in the hive mind strategy. Like I said, this whole episode is called Charm Offensive ultimately, where it's this is what they're doing, where the hive mind ultimately, you know, for as peaceful and as pacifist as they are, they do ultimately have a strategy that for the majority of the episode does seem to be working with Carol. I mean, she ultimately ends up sleeping with them. So she's quite literally sleeping with the enemy in this case, you know, and it all comes down to the cliffhanger at the ending where Manusos, who after having recovered and having been saved by the hive mind, ultimately escapes with an ambulance from the hospital where he's in Panama and makes his way. And by the end, Zosha tells Carol, like, yeah, Manusos is on his way. So it's going to be really interesting when Manusos, who has been very, very, very heavily defiant and does not want to interact with the hive mind at all.
Much so that he's like writing an IOU to the
literally
hospital.
To everybody. And like, it's going to be interesting when he gets to Carol, who up until this point has been very stubbornly defiant, but now seems to be like, yeah, she's like, oh, maybe
like,
these guys aren't that bad.
To what end do you resist at this point?
Exactly.
So, and then she, of course, she has the fun times with Zosha. I feel like in the age of like ships across TV, TV is the ship format for, and people were definitely shipping that. So I feel like that was earned. So again, it's just more conflicting thoughts for Carol. So yeah. Exactly. I think I saw another thing from like Vince Gilligan that said like, if the fans don't know where the show is going, it's good. I don't know where the show is going either.
Good. Vince didn't know where Breaking Bad was going, and you know the rest is history. So my whole thing is like, if there's one like, so the way that we've like, I guess, had our takeaways from each of the shows, right? With Lost, it's the island giveth and the island taketh away. With this show, it's just let Vince cook. Just let Vince cook. I don't care. Look at that. Even if this ultimately does wind up just being a hangout show, ultimately with the biggest budget imaginable, don't care. I'm with it. I am ultimately with it. So with that being said, people, like I said, I'm not going to do our normal sign off right now because we are coming right back with Avatar, Fire and Ash next. Stay tuned.